Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm honored and excited to have on Madelaine Au. Welcome to the show, Madelaine.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Mason.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
And Madelaine is the executive director to the Eugene Tea Festival, which, as some of you probably know, Eugene is my hometown. So it's super exciting that there's a tea festival there now. So we're going to get into a bunch about that. But first, let's get to know Madelaine a little bit more. Madelaine, how did you get into this whole tea thing? That's Camellia sinensis.
Yeah, so I think like most people, I grew up drinking herbal tea, so peppermint, licorice spice. My mom would make me a chai. And of course, being in Oregon, I was drinking Stash, which is a Portland-based tea company. And then it just kind of evolved into like falling in love with chais at coffee shops and then realizing that there was this whole world of loose leaf and then really falling down the rabbit hole when I went to the 2017 Northwest Tea Festival, where I was just like, wow, tea is this magical world. There's a tea community. And then from there, I just became someone that like goes to tea shops and tries to meet tea people and is like, oh, do you want to like, share teas and do a little tea in the park
Where was the Northwest Tea Festival held?
up in Seattle?
Okay, so is it still going on to this day?
It is, yeah, going strong. I went
Okay,
last year actually. It's at like the big convention center, so it's definitely a different vibe from the Eugene Tea Festival, but it's the OG in my opinion, the
for sure.
original tea festival.
And they're just owning the moniker Northwest. So that's Seattle. Then we got the Portland Tea Festival, which I've been to twice. I absolutely adore that event. And then we got Eugene. So we're just going south on I-5. What would you say is like, is there one just south of Eugene too? Is it where are more tea festivals happening on the West Coast?
Yeah, so the International Tea Festival, which is in San Francisco,
Okay.
is the next one. And then there's the Nevada Tea Festival that recently started. So you
Oh,
kind of
wow.
like deviate a little bit. I believe the LA Tea Festival is on hiatus, but it was happening for, I think, 10 years or something. So there's definitely, I-5 corridor worth of tea
Sure.
festivals.
And these are all tea festivals centered around, as I was alluding to, Camellia sinensis. These are not like herbal teas. These are really, we're just honoring the Camellia sinensis plant, correct?
Yes, for the most part, I would say that specialty tea, Camellia sinensis, that is the focus. Although, at least with the Eugene Tea Festival, I like to keep it more broad.
For sure. Well, okay, so what do you love about tea?
I think that for me, tea is something that is just like one of those little creature comforts. So it's something that I look forward to every morning. It's delicious, it's calming. It's like the kind of thing that is both relaxing and energizing at the same time. And it kind of fits into this lifestyle that I've been gravitating towards of just like enjoying life, being in the present moment, slowing down and not just kind of like going. And so, there can be a ceremonial aspect to it. Sometimes when I'm on a tea break for work, I just sit down with my like fancy tea set and I just do a little ceremony for myself. And it feels really special and sweet. And it's very grounding. So there's kind of like that personal level of like feeling connected to tea and loving tea in that way. And then the other way in which like I get really excited about tea is the connection with other people and the way that tea can be a vehicle for social engagement and for community building. Just like having tea friends and being friends with people who are also like as into tea as I am, as well as like being friends with people who run their own tea businesses. That's something that I think is really cool. And I just feel like people who like tea are all good people. So it's a nice way to get to know new people and kind of just like a safe, calm, and lovely community.
I would like to hear you go more in depth on this whole relaxing and stimulating concept for green tea because or Camellia sinensis because I think of caffeinated beverages. We got coffee, tea, energy drinks, which you're probably extremely fond of as well. And I'm just wondering, like, That was a joke. Sorry, Madeline. Madeline doesn't drink energy drinks, y'all. She's
Don't.
I presume she doesn't at least. But I would like you to talk more about that. Like what how could something so you're speaking to an audience of herbalists. We're very like in tune with our bodies and like what plants do medicinally for us as humans. And I'm just kind of curious, can you kind of go more in depth on this whole concept of green tea or drinking Camellia sinensis as like a stimulating beverage, but also like a calming beverage?
Okay, so I'm not a tea scientist, but
Sure.
I'll do my best to kind of speak towards the way that it works. There's different components in tea. I believe it's specifically L-theanine, that makes it so that the experience of being caffeinated is slower. So instead of it just being like caffeine, boom, dumps into your system, it slowly releases over time. So that's kind of speaking to the more scientific aspect of like, why is it not like coffee? Why is it like something that it does energize you, but it's not as immediate, it's not as intense. So there's still that kind of like invigorating but relaxing experience of it kind of like giving you what you need throughout the day,
Sure.
but not like overloading your system.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like all right, so we're delving into a little bit of the science there, but then there also appears to be kind of like the ritualistic aspect. Would you say that just the mere fact of creating this as like a daily ritual is kind of part of the calming effects of the tea?
Definitely. I mean, when you think about like what is it that creates stability in our lives, rituals are definitely one of them, habits, creating healthy, good habits, and like slowing down, drinking a cup of tea, having that be something that you do before you start your day or kind of like as a break to allow you to center and ground yourself is also another element that makes it relaxing. And it's not like fast. Like when you're doing a tea ceremony for yourself, that
Mm,
can be like 15 or 30 minutes of you like doing multiple brewing rounds and like, steeping it, pouring it into one vessel and then into another vessel. It's not really something that you can rush or that you would want to rush. So it just sort of like by the nature of it being ceremonial and ritualistic in that way, it allows for kind of like, oh, okay, like I'm in the present moment, I'm enjoying something delicious, but also finite. So I really want to be present for savoring it.
yeah, typically when you're making green tea, I would think you're not probably sitting there trying to make the strongest cup of green tea, putting it like making it cold so you just suck it back as fast as possible, getting like this stimulating effect. That's not typically how people drink tea. Although it kind of does come to mind as matcha, and I do feel like matcha had kind of like was in the limelight for a little bit because it's super, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but has extra caffeine in it. But there's also probably a matcha ceremonial aspect as well. Can you speak to matcha a little bit?
Yeah, so I love matcha and it's one of those things where I just kind of like my friends and my family laugh about how I cannot make matcha well.
Oh, really?
I have like really tried and I have all the equipment too. Like I have the ceremonial bowl and the whisk and the little like ladle that you use to scoop the matcha. And I just make like the worst, most clumpiest matcha on the planet. I must just have a really weak wrist. But
So,
yeah, so it's a little embarrassing that that's not something that I can do. But when you do that like ritualistic way of making matcha, it is to die for. Like it's
mm,
so delicious, it's so foamy, and like everything is just like really well integrated. I've been to Japan a couple times, and there's a temple that you can go to where you like stare out at a bamboo forest and they whisk a bowl of matcha for you in the ceremonial style. And it's just like some of the best tea that I've ever had. So even in Japan, you're drinking matcha, but it's sort of like this slow ceremonial process and, it's integrated with nature and slowing down and enjoying what's there.
is it higher in caffeine? Do you know? Or is that just like a
Um,
myth?
yes,
Okay.
but mostly because if you think about like how much leaf is being used, there's just like because it's kind of like all crushed and ground up, there's more jammed in. So
Okay.
like if I were to do, I guess if I how I would compare it is maybe like one like tablespoon of loose leaf, maybe they're using like 2 tablespoons of matcha to make your drink. So it's just like the quantity is higher. It's not because it's inherently more caffeinated, it's because they're using more leaf.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know I was going to go in the matcha direction when I was interviewing you today, but I have been curious about some of this stuff. What's your take on matcha lattes and just the overall fad of matcha in general?
Yeah, so I am a green tea girly.
Yeah.
I love green tea, especially Japanese senchas. That is just like my bread and butter, what I drink basically every day. And I also love matcha. And I like matcha was one of those things that kind of also got me into loose leaf tea. So it went from like chai tea lattes to matcha tea lattes, loose leaf. I still love matcha lattes, and as controversial as this may be, I really like the Starbucks matcha latte. There's something about it that is very nostalgic and comforting to
Ain't
me.
no shame in
Some
your
of the,
game.
thank you. Just like some of the harder periods of my life, I have stopped by Starbucks and got their breakfast sandwich and matcha latte to get me through.
So to this day, do you occasionally treat yourself to a matcha latte from Starbucks?
I still do.
I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah, I'm trying to
Yeah.
think of what my Starbucks order would be. I was really digging the cold brew there for a bit, but that stuff is just way too stimulating for me at this point. I can't handle that. Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy. Okay, well, transitioning a little bit, you mentioned part of the reason you love tea is the tea people. And could you tell us why, go more in depth as to why you love and appreciate the tea community?
I feel like with the tea community, there's such like an openness and a welcoming spirit. And then also it's kind of like niche in the way where like you meet someone out in the wild and you're like, wait, you're like super into tea like I am, and you
Yeah.
know that there are like oolongs and pu'ers and senchas and that Camellia sinensis is all from the same plant. And then you just kind of like nerd out and you have just like this really wholesome moment of being like, oh my God, you have such great taste in tea. And I cannot believe that you drink the same stuff that I do. And you know, like what all of this is. So there's like that layer of it. And then the other layer of it is because tea is something that like promotes slowing down. And it's something that has historically been a social beverage. That's also like part of the layering of like, wow, people just seem really open to connecting. And then when you're drinking tea, like you are, you're kind of stimulated, but not in a way that's like really intense. So it's
Right.
like I get this feeling when I drink tea of like mental clarity, which is great for discussion. So I
Yes.
end up having like philosophical conversations with people. And then also, like, tea is connected to a bunch of different issues, both like social justice, just like the history of tea has been kind of tragic.
Mhm.
And then, like there's the issues around sourcing and a lot of different layers. But yeah, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, people who really like tea, I've just found them to be kind of like a little introverted like me
Mhm.
and really sweet and wholesome and kind people that just, want to be friends with other tea people.
So yeah, some people use booze as a social lubricant. Actually, tea, I found, especially attending the Portland Tea Festival a couple times, it really was like an incredibly social event. I mean, just you're on that, like you said, like L-theanine, like that high, and that caffeine is just like drinking tea for hours on end with a bunch of really cool people is just an incredible feeling. And you mentioned like the whole nerding out with people with like similar tastes and just interests. And you're speaking to the herbalist audience, and I think that's one of the reasons why the herbal community is so tight knit, is because we just love talking about the plants. And we all love nerding out on it nonstop. I was telling you before we got on the call that I was listening to you on the Spent the Rent podcast, which is like a local Eugene podcast. So shout out to them. You mentioned that you're interested in herbs and herbalism, but you don't define yourself as an herbalist. Are you still kind of interested in that path, or is it just kind of something you do on the side?
100%. And this kind of leads into something that I mentioned too, but I have had to like cut back my tea
That's right.
consumption a lot, because while like caffeine and tea is not as intense as coffee, it
Yeah,
is still not something that you can just dump into your system endlessly. I think I found for me the sweet spot is just 1 cup a day, which is super sad because I love tea.
yeah,
Um, but my way of being like, okay, tea is more for me, tea can be more than just Camellia sinensis. It doesn't have to be caffeinated. I like just having a hot beverage. And I also like having plant allies and having teas that are actually like good for my system. So
totally.
there are like other beneficial properties that I can be bringing into my day um, through other herbs. And that's why I've become more interested in herbal teas. Now, I say that I don't think I know any more than I did last year.
Fair enough. You've been busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't tell you the last time that I read a book about like herbs or tea. I was super into it when I was in college, and even like a couple years out of college where I was just reading books left and right. But now I mostly read self-help books. So
Oh, fair enough. So two follow-up questions to that. When do you drink your 1 cup of tea during the day?
So I have realized that I can't have caffeine on an empty stomach, and
Hmm.
a lot of people may find this to be true for themselves. So I typically have my first cup of tea either after breakfast, or I have it right before lunch or after lunch. So I
Okay.
usually try to accompany it with a larger meal. That way I don't get, for me, like the munchies. I get really hungry when I drink tea on an empty stomach. And
Hmm.
then I also get kind of like, even if it's just 1 cup, my caffeine tolerance has just, I obliterated it by abusing it. So
I
now I
get
don't
it.
have much.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I kind of feel the opposite for me, at least. I just want to say, like, consuming stimulants, I feel like kind of push out my appetite, but I could see how that would happen for you. Yeah, definitely. You mentioned self-help books, and also I'm a fan of the genre, so I'm just kind of curious if you have any books that you've been reading or read recently that you'd like to recommend.
Yeah, so I have been really into meditation, and then I also was learning about nonviolent communication last year. So I read Say What You Mean, which is like a Buddhist or meditative take on nonviolent communication. And that was a really good read. So I definitely recommend that. I don't remember who the author is.
Okay, that's fair. I'll try to remember to look that up and include that in the podcast show notes. I'm sure I could find it. Um, are there any lessons that you could recall and potentially share with the audience, or is that putting you on the spot too much?
No, it's not. So I meet with like a group of older ladies every other week, and we like meditate and talk about different topics. So I just recently talked about this book with them,
Awesome.
and what
That's
my like
cool.
favorite takeaway was. So good timing.
All right, let's
Um,
hear it. And take your
I
time with
think
it. Teach us, Madeline.
so for me, like my favorite takeaway was that when it comes to getting your needs met, there is a lot of grieving involved.
Mm,
And just this idea of like what do you do when someone can't meet your needs, or you're realizing that you have an unmet need and it doesn't look like, there's any way for you to get it met anytime soon. And the answer is grief. And I think that that is
mm,
beautiful. And I don't know, what other areas people are in. But I know that in Eugene, there's been kind of like a lot more community around community grieving, and having like ritualistic grieving. But even just like on a personal level, being able to have those conversations with myself and to validate my emotions and to grieve my unmet needs, it's just a really healthy way to live life. And it is still honoring those needs without making it like, oh, well, this is just, I shouldn't even have this because it's not ever going to be met. So I think that grief can be a great way to validate and honor and have self-compassion for the
Oh,
experience that you're having.
so important. Well, thank you for sharing. So just so I'm understanding correctly, the book wasn't entirely about that, but that was just kind of one of your main takeaways.
That was the thing where I was like light bulb,
I
like
see.
insight. Yeah.
Ooh, I got
There's like a
goosebumps.
lot of different things that it talks about, but
Totally.
I'd say the other thing that was helpful was the metaphor of like thinking about trying to use nonviolent communication as like trying to change like the course of a river.
Mm,
So you're like, the water is flowing very strongly in one direction, and to try and get it to slowly deviate and go on a different course, it's a very slow process. So just to be patient with yourself as you're trying to learn how to communicate compassionately with other people.
love that. So this is something that I feel like I need to work on. I feel like I'm always on to the next book or the next podcast or whatever. Do you think this might be a book where you later on in the future, you're like, I'm going to re-listen to this to further embed this in my brain and my behavior? Do you know what I'm talking about? You're like, oh, it's just on to the next book, on to the next lesson, da 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 da. But like, I feel like it's really important to like revisit these profound books that we read.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say that I read books at such a slow pace that I am definitely like trying to integrate them as I'm reading them. But that is a book that I would reread again. Because I feel like, some things you may be open to and you may be able to integrate into your experience. And then other things you just kind of forget about or you're not ready to like broach that topic, especially when it comes to like interpersonal communication, because that is very challenging.
Totally.
Yeah.
Do you identify as a Buddhist?
No, I don't. I'm a meditator, I'm a tea
No.
enthusiast, but I'm not religious.
Yeah. Right. I guess that
Yeah.
would by definition be religion. Okay, cool. Well, so speaking of books, I was going to ask you, this doesn't have to be a book, but do you have any recommended resources, and that includes books and or books, for someone that if they want to learn about either tea or tea culture or whatever comes to mind when I say that?
Yeah, so I actually brought my favorite books so that I could show the audience.
Nice.
This
That
is a
is
little tea book,
that's adorable.
and you can see that it is a very, short but informative read. I think it even
Cool.
has cute little pictures. It's by Sebastian Beckwith.
Hmm.
This is a good one for if you're wanting an introduction to Camellia sinensis because it goes over all the different types. It talks about some of the chemical properties. It's just like a really nice overview that's not overwhelming. So that's like the first one that I would recommend to people because, you know, some of us have shorter attention spans these days.
For
Um,
sure.
And then if you're wanting something that's a little bit more textbooky, I mean, this one is just an
Mm.
obvious like go-to. This was like one of the first books I read on tea when I was really getting into it back in 2018. Tea History, Terroirs, Varieties, and this is by the Camellia sinensis Tea House, which is based in Quebec, I believe,
Oh,
Canada.
okay.
Yeah, they have a third edition out now, which I don't own. Sad, but the second edition was great, and it has like tons of pictures. Talks about the tea industry. Talks about all like a bunch of different countries that have tea. Actually, like talks about the processing, and it has interviews with people who work in the tea industry in countries like China and Japan. So you get this totally like more industry focused perspective while also learning a lot about tea. It's a great read.
Fantastic. I will leave links to that in the YouTube description of the podcast description. I don't know if you're like listening to podcasts or YouTube channels on tea, but are there any that come to mind if I ask you, like, are there tea channels that you like, or
That's such a great question. I actually don't like videos,
you
so
don't?
I've
Yeah, you
never
don't learn that
gotten
way.
into YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really learn that way. Mostly my favorite way of learning is just like getting together with other people who like tea,
Mm,
and drinking tea with them and learning from them. I've done that a lot, especially if you go, like, let's say you've got a local tea shop in town, like go there, drink tea with the owner. They will just like dump information on you. That's how I've learned a lot about tea.
that is such a great point. I could not agree more. And just to shout out JT, presuming JT is still around in Eugene.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're in the Eugene area, definitely stop by, hang out with Josh. And if he's there, he'll tell you all about the teas that you're drinking, and it's just a super fun experience. Are there other tea shops you'd like to shout out, whether they're in Eugene or elsewhere?
Yeah, so Angela recently opened up a shop on West
That's
11th,
awesome.
Oregon Tea Traders. Yeah, and
Oh.
she knows so much about tea. Like
Mm,
Angela is someone that is the president of the United States League of Tea Growers, and she grows her own Camellia sinensis plants. Like she has tons of starts every year.
that's awesome.
It's super cool. I've gotten some tea plants from her. So she understands tea from like that agricultural perspective, and she knows a lot more about the processing. And then, she also sells tea, she sources it, and she does like tea 101s and different workshops. So she is a great resource for learning more about tea.
Super cool. Didn't know that. And also, Angela is on the board of directors for the Eugene Tea
She
Festival.
is.
So that's a nice segue to talk about the Eugene Tea Festival. So you started this event, at least I want to say a few years ago, and then the whole what happened? Was it like COVID or something? Something
Yeah.
happened, and put it on hiatus, and you stuck through. And first of all, let's hear a little bit about the history of the Eugene Tea Festival.
Yeah, so I started the Eugene Tea Festival in 2019. In 2018, I was the volunteer coordinator for the Portland Tea Festival, but then I moved to Eugene, still kind of like high off of that tea festival energy, and also friends with like Angela from Oregon Tea Traders and Raj from Young Mountain Tea, and talking to them about like tea community, tea festival, and they were like encouraging me to start a tea festival in Eugene, and I was like, yeah, why not? I've already been the volunteer coordinator, I can do this. And then the pandemic happened.
Uh,
And so, there was like a lot of discomfort around meeting in person, which makes sense. I also felt uncomfortable at the time. There were a lot of questions around like, is it safe? Is it sanitary? And it's like a pour fest. So you're sampling teas using the same cup. It's not exactly COVID friendly event. And like we could have thought about ways to put restrictions on it, but I think that it would have killed the intent of the event. So I'm
totally.
glad that we waited until 2023 when it's like people are vaccinated, we're feeling safe, we're feeling comfortable. It's not like killing people the way that it was at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of like I guess the short of the history for the festival. But I'm kind of glad we waited because the venue that we're using for the festival didn't exist in 2019. They built it during the pandemic, and then it wasn't until like late in 2022 that the farmers market started using it. And it is just like this beautiful indoor outdoor venue. So we're able to have indoor vendors and outdoor vendors, and there's airflow and there's water and there's like so much electricity. It's insane. Like we're never going to have a blackout or have to worry about electricity because there are just so many like individual outlets in the ground of the venue. It was like it was built for the tea festival, and then we got to use it in 2023.
Yeah, last time I visited Eugene, you gave us a tour of the facility, and I don't know, borderline proud of Eugene. I just adore that venue. It is such a it's so centrally located, and like you said, it's like perfect for a tea festival. Uh, you may have told me this already, but why did they build that building? Was that for the farmers market, or was that the intent?
So, yeah, the farmers market used to be located in that area, but it was just like a parking lot. And
Okay.
then they wanted to make it so that the farmers market was able to meet basically almost all year. So now, I think in the past, it was like more limited. Like maybe they opened it in May or April, and then they had to kind of shut things down in like October. But now the festival or the like farmers market season runs from like February 2nd all the way through December. So they take like January off as a break. And
Okay.
that's because of that venue that they're able to do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll leave a link to in the show notes to we did like a little 20-minute interview with you last year. We're actually in the building, so if folks want to check it out, they could see what it looks like right there. So I'm going to ask you this question. I don't know if this is a doozy, but I've always wanted to ask you this question. Why did you, and tell me if I already asked you this before. I don't think I have. Why did you make the Eugene Tea Festival a nonprofit as opposed to say like a for-profit business?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was going through the process back in 2019 of like, okay, how do I put together a festival? I actually met with the founders of the Seattle Northwest Tea Festival, Doug and Julie. We met at the Portland Tea Festival, which is kind of funny.
Right in the middle.
And I was like taking notes, and they were like, okay, you got to make sure that your venue has electricity. That's the biggest thing, because like when they first started, they would have like flickering lights and blackouts. And like that was a big problem because there's so many electric kettles that are just sucking out the electricity. And then the second thing was they were like, if we had the chance to do it over again, we would have made it a nonprofit. So they were encouraging me to make it a nonprofit. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, it's going to be volunteer run. Me, the volunteer running it for free. People are going to be donating their time. They're going to be donating money to it. And then also what I like about making it a nonprofit is that I can push back on that kind of like idea that it needs to make money.
Right.
So instead of it being something where we're like, oh, well, like we need to make sure that we're looking at our bottom line and that we are just like always getting as much profit as possible, it can be like, so this is for the community. This is for the like local economy. We want to support the vendors. We want to make it accessible for the festival attendees. It's also made it easier to apply for grants because we can say like, hey, like we have this mission of providing free education and accessible opportunities for people to learn and taste new teas. And yeah, just kind of going from that perspective of like community building and having it be something that is for the community. And I like that there's a board of directors and a checks and balances, and there's sort of an emphasis on giving as opposed to just taking and trying to make it be like a business, which is not ever what I want it to be. And I'm pretty excited because this year we're actually going to be offering inclusive admission. So people can go to the festival, they can sign up in advance, and they don't have to pay.
That's awesome. The tickets were already incredibly affordable from what I remember last year. You made it very accessible, so that's a really cool that you went one step further with that. All right, well, that's a good transition. Why don't we talk more about the festival? Can you give us like the dates? Well, we already went over the location, so can you give us some more details on the event this year?
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know what it's called, it's at the Farmers Market Pavilion and Plaza in downtown Eugene, Oregon. And then it's going to be on Sunday, May 26th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. That's also when the workshops will be running. This year, we're going to be running them on site. So I'm super excited about that. Yeah, so that's kind of the main gist of where.
So for now, it's a one-day event. Do you think in the future it'll be a weekend, or do you have plans for that?
Yeah. So it's kind of like because we're using the farmers market pavilion on Saturday, it's the farmers market. So we're never going to be able to use that venue on Saturday.
Right. Gotcha.
So the only way to make it a 2-day was so this year we're doing it on Memorial Day weekend. Let's say it's really successful, we could do Sunday, Monday.
Oh, that's true.
Which is kind of crazy, but I'm just going to get everybody to start putting Memorial Day weekend is the tea festival weekend.
Yeah.
That's when everyone goes to a tea festival to celebrate Memorial Day weekend with their families.
I guess the reason I I guess the reason I asked was because I was wondering kind of a different question. Did you notice people last year traveling for this event? And then I was thinking, oh, if it was a 2-day event, it might compel more people to, I suppose, travel from out of town. But I just was curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we did get people traveling from out
That's
of
cool.
town. I know that there were people who came from Seattle, from
Wow.
Portland. I had some people who said that like they had travel plans and they canceled them to come to the Eugene Tea
That's awesome.
Festival, which I was like, wow. I feel
Yeah.
so honored that you decided to do that, that it was that important to you. So that's kind of like what I'm hoping is that, people who really love the tea community are really invested in going to tea festivals, like they're gonna like continue to come out and support and celebrate.
Well, it's time to brag, Madeline. Uh, how was last year's festival received? I actually, I kind of know because I'm also on the board, but like, just yeah, just tell us like what was the reception like last year, and did you come through for those people that traveled out of town?
Yeah, it was magical. And it's kind of funny because I met with someone who attended the festival and was like, this was my first tea festival, and I loved it so much that I decided to go to the Portland Tea Festival. And then I realized that I loved the Eugene Tea Festival even more, which
Respect.
I thought was a big compliment because the Portland Tea Festival has been running longer than the Eugene Tea Festival. And I think that what makes the Eugene Tea Festival is different is in part just kind of like different elements of the community. There's a little bit less of a chaotic vibe. It's
Sure.
a little bit more kind of like magical, whimsical. We had people selling like fairy wings, and I was wearing fairy wings, and then there were people with like wizard hats. Um, and
That's awesome.
it's like it's meant to be something that is in a sense like really oriented towards the community and really about connecting. And I think that the overall flow, like there were always people at the event. We had about like 500 attendees, but it wasn't overwhelming. And because of the way that the space is, we can continue to grow the festival while still keeping those areas of sort of like tranquility and calm and like having manageable flows through multiple aisles. So trying to make something that as we continue to grow it is still kind of like holding on to that spirit of like this is supposed to be fun and relaxing.
Right. How many people attended it last year?
500.
Oh wow. Yeah. Did you already
Yeah,
say that? I missed
I
it.
did.
Oh, my
It's
bad.
okay.
Awesome.
um
Yeah, go for it.
oh, and we had 26 vendors, so that was exciting.
And you plan on having even more this coming year.
Yeah, so we're already at 30 vendors. And we've basically sold out of the indoor plot or the indoor pavilion space,
Awesome.
which is exciting. And also I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna have to start telling people they need to only apply for the outdoor plaza. Um,
Good problem to have. So more vendors. What other improvements are you hoping to see the second year? Because last year was your first year. Obviously, it sounds like a smashing success, but there's always improvements that can be made.
Yeah, so last year we had our workshops offsite. And part of it was just because, it's the first year, having it in a building made it so that we didn't have to do any of the logistics of setting up like workshop tents on site. But it also made it less accessible for people, and it made it a little bit harder for people to do both the workshops and enjoy the festival itself. So this year, having it on site is going to make it so that it's easier for people to attend the workshops, and they'll be able to kind of integrate their experience better. So that's something that I'm really excited about. um, and other things that I'm excited about is that we're going to have a tasting cup for the general admission. So for folks who pay $10, they'll get to have a cup that they can take home. Last year, largely due to us having a limited budget, we just did compostable tasting cups. And some of the feedback we got is that, as you're pouring hot water over and over again into these compostable cups, they do start to basically melt.
Right.
um, so they were composting during the event itself.
Right. Right.
It's like, hey, it's sustainable, but it
Right.
might not be it's not really the experience
Yeah.
that, I necessarily want people to have. So I'm excited that this year we have the funds to be able to invest upfront into buying tasting cups that will also be like, oh, this was from like the 2024 festival and it has the logo on it. And it's something that like you can use, in your tastings at home or just display proudly in your tea cabinet.
What are the cups made out of?
So we're doing sourcing right now, and
Okay.
we're picking between porcelain, glass, or maybe some other kind of ceramic material.
And then it'll have the Eugene Tea Festival logo on it, as you said. That's
Yes.
super cool. Awesome. Yeah, that'll be a reason to attend alone. You mentioned classes on site. Do you have any confirmed classes yet? For the listener, we're recording this February 9th, 2024. We'll try to get this episode out ASAP, but just as of now, do you have any classes confirmed?
Yeah, so another thing that I'm excited about is we're having more ceramists at the festival, and actually some of my favorites. So Hamish from Hamish Jackson Pottery is going to be there, and he will be doing a hands-on clay workshop,
That's
which is
awesome.
like so cool. I love that he's going to be doing an interactive workshop. And then Jonathan from Jonathan Steely's studio is going to be doing a demonstration of different pouring vessels and then giving a conversation around like the background function, design elements, and then optimal tea pairings for those tea vessels. So that'll also be an interactive from sort of like a ceramist perspective.
Wow. Yeah, that'll be amazing to attend. Do you have any confirmed sponsors for this year's event?
Yes. So last year, Yogi Tea was a supporting sponsor, and this year they've upgraded to be a silver sponsor. So thank you, Yogi.
Oh,
Love you. They're also going to actually have a booth this
that's
year.
awesome.
Last year they didn't have a booth, and this year they'll have a double booth. So I'm super happy that a local tea company, and I know crazy as it sounds, Yogi Tea is local to Eugene, Oregon.
When I
And we're
first got
so
into herbalism, Yogi Tea was so instrumental on my path, and I just loved knowing that they were, yeah, right down the road.
Yeah, so it's really, really good to be having them backing the festival. And then Shelton McMurphy Johnson House, which is a nonprofit organization that does like monthly teas and is in this like beautiful Victorian house where you can go and like it's like a museum. They're going to be a supporting sponsor. Rooted Remedies, who
Oh,
you may
nice.
be familiar with, is going to be a supporting sponsor. Um, and I actually, the Eugene Tea Festival got me like super into Rooted Remedies. So now I am
Nice.
a very loyal customer and I love everything that Cass makes. So I'm very happy that she's supporting the festival.
All right.
And last but not least, Jingxi Tea is supporting. So they're a specialty tea company.
Okay. Where are they based? I don't know that. I don't know them.
They so I'm not 100% sure where they're based, but I
Mhm.
know that Sally, who is like my main point of contact, she runs the Nevada Tea Festival
Oh,
and then
cool.
it's also doing this, company. Um, so maybe Nevada, but also maybe not.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, and you mentioned Cassandra, or Cass as you called her, Cassandra Lynn was on shit, I don't even remember the episode. She was on the Herbalist Hour as well. So yeah, like you said, some of the HerbRally audience might already be familiar with her, and she's got a great herb shop also downtown Eugene. And not to put more work on your plate, Madelaine, but I think you would be a great person to teach a workshop at her Rooted Remedies.
Oh, thank you. I will
Yeah.
consider it.
Just my friend Nick will teach there on occasion, and I think that that'd be really fun to maybe like lead some sort of tea workshop or something. But awesome. Well, so we could talk about this in regards to sponsorship as well. If someone in the audience has like a business maybe in the Pacific Northwest and they're interested in sponsoring, uh, or besides sponsoring, if someone wants to be involved with the festival, besides sponsorship, how should they reach out to you? Or are there jobs that you could think of that are open right now? Or just kind of how can folks get involved?
So if they're a vendor or sponsor, they can fill out the vendor outreach form and then I'll reach out to them, or they can just email me directly at Madelaine@eugeneteafestival.org.
Awesome. All right, and we'll
Yeah.
try to leave a link right there on the video for easy spelling there. We'll also include the email address in the podcast show notes as well, because Madelaine gave us permission to do that. Okay. So, do you feel as if the Eugene Tea Festival has brought the Eugene tea community closer together?
Definitely. So one thing that I was hoping would happen for years is that a Eugene Wuwo ceremony group would establish, because there is the Northwest Wuwo, which is actually based in Portland. Um, and like they're very instrumental in the Portland Tea Festival. They always like do a used teaware and ceremony demonstration. And they meet like every month on Sunday. And I had always wanted to go to one of the ceremonies. And so the first one that I got to see was at the Eugene Tea Festival when I was like, come participate, do a ceremony. I want you here. And then I think like in part because of that, a Eugene Wuwo group actually formed in Eugene. And so I've been able to attend once a month on it's like the third Sunday. Um, and we all like get together, bring our teaware, pour our tea. We get to try like different teas from other people. It is like a silent ceremony, so you kind of have to like meditatively pay attention to what everyone is doing, and you try to like brew at the same time and do the different steps at the same time as the other people. So it's just like a really cool experience, and it's like a tea community that has formed that meets monthly and exists. And I feel like the festival is in part thanks to that, because enough people gathered and were interested and filled out, like a form to sign up for this group, that it actually became a thing.
Yeah, and then, the second year is going to come around. It's just going to further bond everyone even more. A question that just came to mind is last year, so I've organized a lot of events as well. Were you actually able to just kind of reflect and watch the event happen, or were you just running around the whole time? Were you actually able to partake in the woo-woo and all of that? Or how was that experience like for you personally?
Yeah, so there was a lot of running around, but I I also did get a chance, especially during like the later part of the day, to talk to all of the vendors. I helped as like sort of an assistant for the Wuo ceremony, so I got to participate in that. I didn't stay the whole time just because I had other things that I needed to do.
Sure.
And people had questions for me throughout the day. Um, so yeah, I think like from my perspective, what I remember about it is that it was really fun. I did get to drink tea. I love talking to all of the vendors and hearing about their experience, and kind of feeling like, oh wow, I'm like really getting to connect with people. And then after the festival, I got to meet new people that I've never met before, who are like, oh my God, you did the tea festival. Like, it was great. I loved it. I love tea. I'm so glad like a tea festival exists, and then kind of having it reflected back on me in that way. And I just feel like the overall feeling around the festival was really positive, really sweet. People are really engaged.
Yeah,
And there was just a sense of like appreciation that it is something that exists, which is what I wanted.
love to hear it. Well, what are your future goals for the Eugene Tea Festival? And another question I've always wanted to ask you is, I mean, and maybe you don't know this yet, but how long do you kind of feel like you might be the executive director? Do you think you plan on doing this for a long time? Yeah, just kind of like future of ETF and your role.
Yeah, so for the foreseeable future, I'm going to continue running the festival on a volunteer basis. I don't ever really plan on being paid by the festival. My goal is for it to be something that serves the community.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like festival goals, my hope is for it to become something that can like live long beyond my existence. So the hope is to eventually be able to have enough funds to hire someone else to run the festival, and for me to just continue to participate as someone that is, guiding, donating my time, being there. But like I would love one day, honestly, like my goal is just one day I get to go to the festival as an attendee and just spend like, the
Yeah,
whole day doing workshops, drinking tea, and just being so happy that there's a tea festival in my town. So that's kind of like, way further down the road, but
sure.
it's still my child. It's
Yeah.
still a, needs my support. And so I'm
Right.
here until the day that it's able to fully stand on its own feet.
I guess that's another perk, I suppose, of having nonprofit versus like a business is, you will be able to pass it along to the next person who's gung ho about the mission of tea community in the Eugene area. So, all right, let's go to the advice segment of the show. Um, Say someone's looking to organize, could be a tea event or like an herbal event, since that's primarily the audience for the Herbalist Hour. Do you have any advice for someone who's looking to start a community event?
So I would say don't do it alone.
Hmm.
Even from the very beginning, I wasn't doing the tea festival alone. I was talking to people, I was getting advice, I was asking people like Mason to join the board and, provide their support and their input and knowledge and expertise. And I don't feel like I would have had as successful of an event if I had just been trying to do it all myself. So definitely from the very beginning, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to talk to people who have done something similar and know what they're doing, and then try and get them to be involved and invested in my idea.
That might be the advice. I love that. It really does take a village and creating a community event. So, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So, all right, we did the advice segment. Let's get to the cliche question segment. A lot of people say don't ask guests what their favorite herb is. I never do that, but I'm going to kind of do that with you. So I'm going to ask you, if you could choose just three teas, and they got to be Camellia sinensis, all right? What are your favorite three Camellia sinensis teas?
So, not to do too big of a shout out for different companies, but
Please do.
um, Japanese sencha, anything from Sugimoto is
Okay.
amazing. Getsudo also has a really good sencha as well as genmaicha. So
Hmm.
that's like number one, like what I basically drink every day. When I'm feeling like doing something different, I usually have an Olishan Black, which is kind of like a oolong inspired black tea from floating leaves. It's like sweet and just a wonderful daily drinker, and I really like that one. So that's something that I restock up on. And then I guess third place, I don't necessarily know if I'd give it to a tea. Maybe a milk oolong, like a velvet oolong. Portal Tea, that has a location in Eugene. They have a velvet oolong that's really nice. And that is also something that if I had more money, I'd probably buy like a pound.
Oh yeah, I
But
know,
I'm
right?
already buying like 5 pounds essentially, a pound of Olishan Black. So
Are these like bricks or
they're not
loose?
bricks,
Yeah.
but it's loose leaf. They're like the oolongs are little balls and then that are kind of like tightly rolled up. And then the
Giant.
sencha is kind of like finer, almost like flat needles is what it looks like.
Yeah, I remember when I first started going to JT, he would have these like bricks of tea, and I just thought that was so fascinating for whatever reason. And very cool. Well, thank you for sharing. Do you have any uh transitioning away from the Camellia sinensis, do you have any plant allies or favorite herbs that you like to use in your daily life?
So I did want to give a shout out to Rooted Remedies for their restorative tea.
Hmm.
So I know it's not facing the right way, but
That's all right.
it has calendula, plantain, dandelion, burdock, nettles, marshmallow, yarrow, and licorice.
Nice
And
blend.
I really like this tea because I've been having like a chronic dry throat and some acid reflux symptoms for, let's say, 2 or 3 years. And not to be like that person that is just like, this tea cured my symptoms, but I don't like suffer anymore. And I drink this tea basically, this is like the tea that I drink every morning.
Herbs work.
And it just really helps coat my throat. And it just kind of, I have to kind of talk for my job a good amount of the time. So having something that is supporting my ability to feel comfortable and not feel like yeah, I so Rooted Remedies has a bunch of tinctures and teas that I like to use that are all great for my throat. And a lot of them use similar ingredients to what I just listed.
I should know this, but do you know if she sells online?
She
I could look.
does,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. So I want to say it's rootedremedies.co.
Yeah.
Yeah, .co. Rootedremedies.co. We'll leave a link to that in the podcast show notes. So awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. Yeah, and one more time, shout out Cassandra Lynn and Rooted Remedies in downtown Eugene. Fabulous herb shop, which again we got to visit, and she was on the Herbalist Hour as well. That was a super fun interview to get to know her more as well. I wasn't going to originally ask you about this, but we still have a couple minutes. Madelaine, what does your meditation practice look like?
So I meditate every morning for 15 minutes. Sometimes when I'm like really deep into my meditation practice, I meditate every morning for 30 minutes. But sometimes time doesn't always allow for that. And so I kind of cut it back to 15. And then because I believe in community, I meditate with a community of meditators. So I'm a part of Eugene Insight Meditation Center, which actually just meets online. So literally, if any of you want to meditate, Sunday, 6:30 to 8, we meditate every Sunday via Zoom. And that's been
Really?
something, yeah, really supportive for my practice. Yeah.
Okay. So if someone wants to participate, are you literally logging in at 6:30 Pacific time and logging out at 9, or I'm sorry, what'd you say,
8.
8? Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you going the full hour and a half, or do you come and go as
Yeah.
you please?
So I do that group every Sunday for an hour and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. And
I have
then,
never meditated that long. That's impressive.
well, it's like there's a Dharma talk, a 30-minute
Okay.
meditation, and then a discussion afterwards. So it's not the full hour and a half for the meditating, but it's like it's a good meditation. And then I meet with a smaller group that we call our little Sangha every other Wednesday for an hour and a half with a similar structure of like meditating for 30 minutes and then having a discussion on whatever topic we pick that week.
I never thought about meditating in a group, but I suppose that could help compliance. There's the accountability aspect. You're like, oh, if I'm going to show up, I kind of have to do this. Do you recommend folks look in their area to actually do meditation with others in person?
Yes. Yeah, being able to meditate with others in person, sometimes like the meditations that I have in person with other people are way deeper and
That's
more
so
connected
cool.
than when I just do it for 15 minutes.
Is it
Yeah.
because of the fact that you're there and feeling like the social pressure, or do you think there's actually like some sort of energetic component where you're actually all kind of going deep together and you could get as spiritual or non-spiritual as you want?
So we call it the field of care. Um,
Mm, I love
and
it.
it's basically like, this sense of like we're all generating this positive will to be present. And also, like my group in particular is compassion focused. So it's this idea that we're all like bringing loving awareness
Okay.
and compassionate awareness to our experience together in an interconnected way because ultimately we're not separate, we're all interconnected, we're fundamentally connected to other people. So
That will definitely vibe with the HerbRally audience. So thank you for sharing that. And one more time, please tell us what the Eugene based Zoom one is called.
so it's the Eugene Insight Meditation Center.
Is
Let
there a
me
cost
see.
associated with that?
It's totally free.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
EugeneInsight.com. If you want, the link is like right on the front page, I believe.
Super cool. Well,
Yes.
I'm gonna definitely leave that in the podcast show notes. That is such an incredible resource. I'm glad I asked. It just came to me. I was like, oh, I have to ask Madelaine about her meditation. So, well, very cool. This has been a lot of fun, Madelaine, getting to know you a little bit more. EugeneTeaFest.org, if I'm getting that right.
Yes.
As well as we'll go at Eugene.T on Instagram. Anywhere else you'd like to send folks to learn more about you and your work?
Those are the main ones.
Cool.
Thank you, Mason.
Of course. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Well, yeah, any closing thoughts before we wrap up and get out of here?
Come to the tea festival. It's gonna
Do
be
it.
great.
I love it. Well, awesome. We'll leave all links in the YouTube description, podcast show notes, and everything. Thanks once again to Madelaine for joining us, and thanks to you all for listening. We'll see you in the next episode of the Herbalist Hour. Bye
Thanks,
bye.
everyone.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our HerbRally YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an HerbRally Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our HerbRally Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, herbrally.com/schoolhouse. Enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode, and take care.